What's up, everyone? This is a special episode here of Figure Reaction. How are you, Dave?
I am doing fantastic. And remember, guys, this is a special episode. Not like those special shows from the 80s that made you feel all guilty and weird. No, this is a lot more fun. So don't forget, hit that like button. If you are new here, please hit that subscribe button. This is some cool stuff we get to do. We have some very neat opportunities that this guy right here sets us up for. And if you want to stay on top of these types of things, you got to hit that subscribe button. We are on the road to 1,000, but we need your help for that. And for you guys helping us out allows us to get more events like these out. So, sorry, I'm doing okay, but
Good.
These guys are more important.
Absolutely. And, we've been seeing a lot of things come across here this year and with our previous years with new toy lines. And we've talked about before, if there's something I like to see, it's like, I want to have it now. And sometimes that doesn't get the chance to happen. But the cool part is we get an opportunity to talk to the people behind the scenes that are actually creating this need because of their creativity and style. And it's just really cool stuff to see. And tonight's guest is no exception. They've kind of hit the scene here in the past month, and it's been coming at you in waves, almost like a tsunami type of stuff.
They're like a storm.
Almost like a storm. Don't worry, the puns will continue on as we go. But tonight we're going to talk to our guest, who is the creator of this new toy line called Realm Corsairs. And that, ladies and gentlemen, will bring in our guest, Mr. Quaid Cuddall. Evening, Quaid. How are you?
Good evening. I am awesome. It's good to see you guys.
Well, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us tonight about your new toy line. And really, we have a lot of questions actually, but also we really want to just take a moment and celebrate your accomplishments so far and the really huge success and attention that Realm Corsairs has been getting so far, and what we can look forward to in the future. For those that have been watching the show a lot, we always kind of put a little slide deck along the way because I despise going to web pages and scrolling up and down. It definitely takes away on the bandwidth. And it gives me a chance to put a little creative spin on our conversation, because tonight is our evening with Realm Corsairs.
I mean, blatantly, when I saw these, I was just ooh, because it's kind of weird. I mean, the timing is really, really good for this. I mean, you're hit. For some reason, pirates seem to be the next rage. With the independent toy lines, the Valiver series is coming out with their version. All the shows that are been going on the last couple of years, whether it be Black Tide versus Our Flag Means Death to, I mean, for all I know, I'm going to see a Pirates of Darkwater revival. I mean, I'm waiting for that to happen, the way things are going. And this is also something that's also, I don't want to say new territory, but it's in some ways an untapped one. So you've got yourself a lane here that I don't think anyone, I don't want to say competition, but you have it right now. And
this is very much the impetus for the whole idea. It was, that's kind of marketing 101. At least if you want to do something long term, you look for a niche or a need, more specifically, that's not being filled, and you try to fill it. And that's precisely where this idea was born from. And frankly, this whole premise has been in my head for quite a long time, with honestly, no vision of where to put it. But the pirate genre specifically is something that we saw a gaping void in the beginning of the year. And I thought that was so strange that there wasn't any mainstream representation of, a storytelling device that's not just untapped, but fairly limitless. There's a reason that Four Horsemen chose the theme they did. There's almost nothing that doesn't fit within their world. So they've got endless possibilities for toys they can make. Well, you've got yourself a brand right there, and we wanted an idea that was similar. And pirate struck a chord, and it struck a chord because it was already something that I was personally invested in. I would say that the strongest impetus was just that. It wasn't just that, you know what, I want to make toys and I know what kind of toys I want to make. It was the fact that there's no pirates around. So I sat there with myself. I was like, do I wait until another company does what I want so that I can consume it? Or do I jump in the water with both legs and see if I can do something myself? And that was always my dream. And these things have flowed very naturally. You know, I have screenplay writing in my background for the longest time. And just like the story for these characters and these products have been writing themselves, the products write themselves. I mean, they were not hard to come up with. They were very natural. One, for the team at Four Horsemen to bring into realization. The whole process was very collaborative, but they, as creative as they felt birthed very naturally.
So, who is Quaid?
Quaid is somebody who's living right now, anyway, living and building a dream that he's had since he was little. I mean, you know, I always said to myself, you know, even though it wasn't really that long ago that I was little, that
okay, I'm still am too.
I always expected to grow out of what was essentially my passion. I had a camcorder and a toy in front of it doing any number of things every day. That was my entire childhood. If that's what I could be doing, that's what I was doing. And so filmmaking came into play of that, and that's something that I got to do for, you know, straight out of high school. I made 3 independent films that were each 3 hours long. That was probably my first biggest adventure, and that's kind of what taught me a lot of some of the tools that I'm using now when it comes to structuring a world that's cohesive, having a storyline that's linear, and a narrative that is making sure your brand has purpose, with purpose and passion behind it, rather than, you know, you're either just trying to sell something or you have a cool idea. They need to be synonymous. You need to have something that complements each other while you're doing that. And so making those movies really helped teach the skills that it would take just on a marketing level, not to get some of those things off the ground. But I haven't ever stopped telling stories and playing since I was little. And frankly, it was precisely that I kind of thought would maybe keep me away from some of the other things in adulthood. I mean, man-child's a real term, and people use it in the positive and the negative sense. And I'm afraid it wasn't ever a piece of shame I carried around, but it was certainly something that, specifically with my background, was not widely accepted as this purposeful way of self-expression. Certainly not in the state that I come from. But I didn't really ever see that as a roadblock, just something that somebody might have trouble pairing with later. And my wife didn't flinch when she came into the picture, and she was integral to the entire process. And it took a little while.
Back in the day, the first time my now wife visited where I lived, and she saw the shelves, and she didn't run. Yeah, I'm like, keep her.
We're done, right? Exactly. Yep. That was a pretty similar experience for me. In fact, I'm not sure what, I can't remember when she saw the room, but the fact that she just went, huh. All right. I mean, she's just, you know, there's a line in, it's a parallel, but there's a line in Amazing Spider-Man 2 where she goes, "You're Spider-Man," and I love that, but I love Peter Parker more. And that was the conversation I got to have with her. And that's actually literal, because those were the movies I made. That's a whole other conversation, but those were the movies that I made.
Well, Fred, you were saying you were wearing a Spider-Man cosplay at the time, but
right.
But I think that level of just togetherness kind of also goes into the fact that, as I say here, we talk about yourselves and as collectors. I mean, this toy line is kind of like a collaboration with you and your spouse, correct?
Absolutely. She's one and the same. You don't have the universe, and you don't have the feedback that brought things out of the Tide Realm, so to speak, without her input. You know, I'm boundless creativity, but it really helps when I have someone who's enabling that and focused it. I'm fairly organized, but it's extremely gratifying when you have someone who's not really versed in that lingo. It's not like she was part of that world, but she's a book girl. She's very invested in storytelling. And there was a moment while we were writing specifically some of the things that have to do with our sea creature characters that, you know, I got done expressing what was one of my main points for the line and for a product. And she just sat there and went, well, I want all of these things. The fact that I consoled her like she was a fan, not just my wife, that was very much what set a fire under my butt. And I've had quite a bit of confidence surrounding the idea ever since.
That's awesome.
And we haven't gotten really any negative you're going to get negative feedback. You're going to get either, you know, people that are confused about certain motivations surrounding the project or preferences that people have that aren't getting met. But on average, nobody's really batted an eye at having trouble grasping the concept or not being excited about what's coming. And I think it helps that there's nothing else in the playground right now that resembles this. And I was kind of alluding to that to just fans of my photography over the last few months, that, you know, I'd get somebody who would compliment something and that was fun. And I just kind of throw out there that, hey, we got this thing coming. I can't talk about it, but I can say it's like nothing else on the market right now. And I think that helped as well.
And that's something we'll see as we go through the slides. But as I was stalking you and your Instagram page, I was looking at some of the earlier posts and the photography you've shown, and just the composition and detail on it really kind of speaks to what you're saying in regards to your upbringing and your own experiences, as you were saying, you know, creating film, composition, and such. So I you know, the product shots that we'll be looking at, are those produced by you as well, or is that something that also goes with your collaboration with the studio?
So the only thing, well, Four Horsemen Studios is handling, you know, the entire production from start to finish, you know, ground up,
Okay.
getting the products out there. But the marketing side is all on me. So yeah, I haven't, you know, me and my wife are newlyweds for one, so we don't have very much, if certainly not an endless plethora of resources. So I do have to do a lot myself. You know, the storytelling could really only be done by one team, but when it came to the photography, that was something I knew right out the gate that I would have to cover on my own. And so I spent the first 6 months of this year perfecting that and making sure that craft was ready once there was actually products to display. My background did help, you know, jumpstart that. I got very good, very early feedback when it came to just having fun with it like that.
Well, before we continue, we do have our third co-host in, so I'm going to bring him on as well. And of course, that is our ever lovable man with a deep, deep voice, T-Man 978. Welcome on board, man. How are you?
Hello.
I do want to throw this out there. Just a T-Man. I've actually, there's not a lot of people that I've had the honor of speaking with that I'm actually familiar with already. I've met a lot of really cool new people, but I've been watching you for a while. I'm a big Transformer guy. I always have been, and so it's really cool to.
Thank you. Now he will definitely support everything you're going to do now.
Well, actually, because of that, that's a great question. Just to kind of go to the other question is, what do you collect? You know, you mentioned she saw your shelves, she saw your display. What is on your shelves? What do you have? I mean, you mentioned before that you've got some stuff that I know we were alluding to before the show started, older than you are. Right. So I'm kind of curious, what is on that shelf?
There's tons on that shelf, and there's tons of things that I've always been very confident that I think my favorite piece in the whole collection is my HasLab Unicron. And that was a big, big deal when that happened back in, I think, 2018, end of 2018, beginning of 2019. I cannot remember. It was long enough ago that it was a huge, huge deal, and it was a huge, huge price tag, of course. So, you know, not only is it the centerpiece of the room, but it was controversial for a reason, because it brought, you know, under certain contexts, people were trying to debate, okay, do we pay rent and have groceries this month? And so they were having that debate between their spouses, and all I could think to myself as, an unmarried, 18, 19-year-old kid, is I was like, if you guys are if it's that hard up, then no, don't buy the Planet Guy. But I was all for it because I had dreamt of that toy since I was 8 years old. And I think it was the most I'd ever spent on anything ever. I can't say that that's the case anymore, but that's another conversation.
Yeah, none of us can say that.
But as far as everything that's in there, there is a little bit of everything. When it comes to me, I'm specifically attracted to kind of the monster type figures. So I don't have a lot of something like G.I. Joe, because G.I. Joe isn't cool, but because it's a lot of army guys. And that wasn't really my favorite thing to play with as a kid, but it was always something that was animal themed, robot themed. All my favorite things to do with Transformers were when it was focused on the robots rather than the humans. Like, there was a lot of folks that can share that opinion. But that was the first impetus to toy collecting to begin with. My mother first purchased a little, I think it was probably $3 of Spy Changers Optimus Prime, if anyone remembers those things. They were barely a toy, but he was my first thing ever. And when I first opened him, I didn't know that he did anything. He was just a car. Mom flipped him open, and the rest was history. I could not get enough of that. And so, Marvel is a huge thing. Spider-Man, like I said, is a huge player in that. So there's walls of Transformers, walls of Spider-Man, and even more walls of Lego. That's the big one.
I assume you like Beast Wars.
Oh yeah, Beast Wars all over it. That's possibly between that and Transformers Prime. That's where it's at for me.
Oh, I think you just became T-Man's best friend. Well, I guess the question also is, now that with your newlywed, has the collecting bug kind of bled over with her as well? Are there certain toy brands or just pop culture items that she has desire to like?
It's become more of an interest to her. I'll kind of go back to the previous things that was mentioned. You have that moment where she doesn't bat an eyelash and you go, "This is the one." That moment was very much, our relationship was long distance for almost a year before we even met each other. And so, we struggled to come up with things to do together on a screen. And one of those things was sharing with each other, stories and TV shows that we enjoyed. So one of the things that we found ourselves sharing was Transformers Prime. And we watched probably all 3 seasons. And I figured for like the first, 20 episodes that she was kind of just tolerating it. And then one afternoon we're talking. I think we've only been talking for a little while, and she goes, "Wait, can we watch more Transformers?" And I went. So of course I said, "Just give me a second," and I went and bought a wedding ring. Then we came back and watched more.
Good man. Good man.
So after that point, yes, the simple answer is yes. She's not going online and buying action figures of her own. She does kind of have a little stuffed animal thing of her own. I'm not exempt of that either. That's a whole other story. But she is interested in it specifically with the storytelling aspect. When she figured out, I can't remember what her name is. Horseman has either a fairy. She's a kind of badass fairy, but is Artemis Silvercord?
Yes.
Her name.
You're absolutely correct.
Really, really cool, and I still can't track one down for her. It's really, really annoying, but that one she responded to pretty well. We've had folks ask about things like mermaids. I can only talk about that for so much, but there are lots of ideas that compel her. And so I think specifically, if once we're able to realize some of our products, I know she'll get even more invested in that.
Cool. Excellent.
Well, you talked about the collaboration that you and your wife has in regards to creating this world. Let's kind of dive into that a little bit and talk about the lore, the story, the world building that you two are putting together. And I want to kind of go with the overarching premise of the history leading up to things now. We're talking about the entire entity of the Tide realm. And it says, for millennia, the black tide has been a swirling vortex with no direction, as the gods of the ocean have waged war upon themselves. The three gods stirred up the dark tides, resulting in the creation of the Tide Realm Isles.
Final confrontation resulted in their disappearance, leaving the men and monsters of this world to fend for themselves.
Dun, dun, dun.
Line.
You guys are doing great.
And scene. So we were looking at this whole historical tug of war of power amongst these three god entities. What can we talk about that, delves a little deeper into the war of the three gods?
These are pillars of the story, and they're actually the very first idea that we had over anything else. And there's tons and tons of concepts and tons of story input that my wife was a part of. These guys are so early on in the development, even though they've become, they've transcended just an idea. They're a pillar of what makes the brand what it is. They're something that kind of came to me overnight. They were the impetus for the entire line. And the reason for that was because, like I said before, you want a product that has, not just passion, but purpose. And I wanted the inception of the line to have a premise that was continually renewable. I wanted characters to be able to have a conflict that was always present. So there needed to be a higher power. There needed to be origins. There needed to be a grand scheme for the Tide Realms that push the factions to be what they are. So while the characters and creatures that you're following have either direct or indirect connections to each of these people, these beings, they're integral to what makes the story function the way it does. And there's almost nothing about their influence that each character or each artifact or each location doesn't touch on in some ways. And so it's very much something, again, I'm going to talk about it all the time. Transformers is always going to be an inspiration, despite the fact that I've been playing with pirates just as long as those guys. But my favorite aspect of Transformers is the kind of the creationism element of what makes that world what it is. So the cosmic battle between Unicron and Primus, and the fact that Primus is that creator, and the reason that these characters come from what they do, it's all of their origins, their reason for being that propels people forward, those motivations that make Optimus what he is. It's not just because he's a compelling character and that he's the good guy. It's that he has a foundation that's bigger than himself.
So this breakdown, these pillars, this pantheon, obviously, like I said, this is these three here are the greater picture, while all your sub characters are literally just I was gonna say, it kind of gives me a very Warhammer feel to it, if you've ever familiar with that. While there's the battles going on, there's the greater war that's still bigger than everything else.
It's a very, I'm not going to use the word common story trope, it's the popular story trope because it's renewable, because it works. Warhammer is actually not something I'm terribly versed in, but it's not surprising to me that there's a story structure here that's reminiscent of that. And that's exactly what these guys were supposed to be for. They're things that, they continue to affect the ongoing story as well as the past. We have plans for them not only in the present, but in the future, and things that are long since after them. They have weight to them that affects, the potential for years and years worth of product. These guys will continue to be relevant, regardless of where they show up within that toy line, so long as things go according to how we'd like them to.
So the feeling I'm getting from these three gods is that they're neither good nor evil. They're just kind of, they're entities. They have these focus. So as this battle has been going on in this world, was this planet, just a plane in of itself? And then as they battled, it started building up the layers. I mean, I know we see the death, sea, and horizons. I mean, that gives that 3-layer view, like similar to creationism and stuff, with heaven, earth, and hell and whatnot.
Well, I love that that's where your brain is headed, because that's what I was hoping people were going to pick up on, and confident that would be very apparent within the three story structure. Because absolutely, it's supposed to give you those three elements of, what's beyond life and what's in between life and what life is now. And so it brings those three elements together to have this, pantheon of what should be balance, but has become destruction. These are not a singular god of a perfect vision. They're flawed beings just like their creations, and their creations are kind of a byproduct of their inability to find a still point between the three of them. And the three of them should be complementing each other, but their egos and own personal desires are getting in the way. The god of endless horizons he's interesting because he's complex, and he's the reason that the human characters exist. So there's a lot that comes with him specifically.
Well, I was gonna say the thing I find, I'm looking at these names here. We have the god of the sea, the god of death, and then the god of endless horizons, which, by the way, that was very cool, very unique direction. But every single one of these is something that is representing something constant. The sea is constantly in motion. Death is a constant in life, and endless horizons is exactly that. It's endless. I'm not seeing a good or I'm seeing an evil here. I'm just seeing something that is affecting everything. A consistent, it's its own state, if that makes sense.
Absolutely,
it's above good and evil. It's beyond morality.
Yeah, and everything grew very naturally after that idea. Once we had this, paradigm that could shift on itself at any point and continue to essentially write the script for us. That was the entire rationale behind, how do you keep this pirate theme firmly integrated within something that's, bordering on cosmic? Well, it's the fact that, it's full of gray areas. There's blurred lines. Good guys look like bad guys and bad guys look like good guys. And that's what makes the pirate play pattern as interesting as it is.
Well, that kind of leads into what we have is there's something that happened to start this conflict and something that happened to end this conflict with the entity's disappearance. And the last line you have here, leaving men and monsters to fend for themselves. And that's kind of where we see, I'm assuming the creation of, as you said, their offspring has happened over time. And it kind of leads into your story now has moved along a length of time to where we currently see these characters and the factions that you have started to introduce. And we're going to talk about the newest one that you kind of brought up first, and that is a little bit of a backstory with the Black Regent. So again, I took a little bit of your words and put them on here. Is who was the Black Regent? Initially heralded as saviors of the Tide Realm Isles, the Black Regent began as an alliance of rogue captains united under the banner of reform. With everything good, there's an underlying sub counter going in there, and it says, however, the Black Regent harbored darker ambitions led by the calculating Captain Horace Ravensword. The faction's vision of peace was marred by an insatiable hunger for power. Really powerful words, kind of bringing that intrigue, plus your media post with that shadowy captain there is really cool. So I'll open the questions up to the other guys first if they have everything about the Black Regent.
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind, and I hate to say this one, you know how I made a Warhammer reference earlier? And it sounds, as you said, you're not too familiar with it, just so you know, in the Warhammer 40K or 40K universe, there's a character called Horus who was a very big bad guy, actually.
I was going to say we did quite a bit of research when it came to naming characters and making sure that we were, sticking close to as unique as possible when it came to, RIP. These guys specifically are intensely integral to specifically our hero characters, Captain Alistair Morningstar. These are, I can't say too much because we're still waiting to dive deep into that storyline. There's implications that these guys have that do exactly what I was describing the influence that the gods have. They blur the lines between what is right and what is wrong. So their presence is something that you feel even while they're off screen. They're very comparable functionally to something like the Empire, but with a little bit more subterfuge, and functionally they are something that has presented themselves one way, and they are doing things behind the scenes that are not as such.
And as we go through Leachy's factions and the figures in this toy line, there is an image that you've been putting with them, complementing again their vessel of choice. So can we talk about the ship that I have on this slide as well?
So that is there's very few names that we're still workshopping, so to speak.
Okay.
But Raven's ship specifically, if I'm recalling correctly, as we're still writing story material, is the Sovereign's Gaze. And that ship specifically has been constructed out of, these guys started as pirates themselves and decided to monopolize the waters that they prowled and begin hunting their own kind. And that ship specifically is made out of fallen pirates.
I do love the faction emblem where it's the anchor and scales and kind of, as you said, there's layers behind the meaning of that.
That's a cool symbol. That is a very cool faction symbol.
I have one question about IP and whatnot. Like, how much work do you have to do to, like, once you think of a name for one of your products or characters, like, how much work do you have to do to make sure that that name isn't taken?
Things about copyright law, or saying that there's nice things about copyright law is funny, but one of the workarounds when it comes to coming up with products specifically is that things like character names and places are, they're not able to be branded the same way the title like Realm Corsairs would be, because you're, for lack of a better term, swimming in waters that are saturated with other creators that have other ideas, and you're not able to realistically balance keeping everything wholly original.
Okay, but no, that's a really cool insight in regards to like the balancing of creativity versus production, manufacturing, distributing a brand. But I get going back to the Black region, it's really interesting to see like this governing body that has a little more under the hood, so to speak. And I'm excited to see more about it as you guys release that with the brand. But we'll move toward the next one here. Ironically, we're talking about the protagonist, I guess, or as you said, the hero of this world, and that is Captain Alistair Morningstar, the lost child of the Corsair. What can you tell us about Alistair?
Now, there's a lot to talk about when it comes to Alistair, because he's, again, and go back to all my points of inspiration. That's why there's nothing new under the sun. But you take Aragorn and Optimus Prime, and you put them together, and that's essentially the personality you're working with. Obviously, functionally, you got a massive difference between, the worlds that are not colliding there. But that was the personality we wanted. We wanted this sense of conflict between this greater calling to who he's meant to be and this resistance because he has a past that's not as pretty as what his future could be. Both Optimus Prime and Aragorn share that in common. And so there were leadership qualities that we wanted to make sure he retained, so that he felt like a pillar of strength, but we wanted him to be a conflicted pillar of strength. And this sense or longing for meaning and belonging and value was something I thought was very ironic to instill in a pirate, because those are not really things you'd expect to come from a character like that. And so he's become a pirate because piracy is what he knows. It's what he was reared out of. It's where he belongs. And yet he has this, like I said, longing for value and meaning that he can't find in this world that's become chaos and order that can't ever be met. And so these villains that come into the picture put decisions in front of him that he's never had to make, because honestly, his world has been very simple as a pirate. He's a staple of the waters. He's kind of become, if pirates could have a police force, he's this unspoken, sheriff of the waters that comes in, and there's a reason that the ship is called the Debt Collector, because he's essentially bringing order to piracy in and of itself. Alistair's mission is not, kind of like a Viking crusader where they go through and pillage and raid. It's piracy is something that he wants to actually instill honor among thieves. That's his mantra. And he's inherited his ship. He's inherited a lot of what he has. There's jewelry and things he carries that the crew members don't know the stories behind. He's not secretive, but he's withdrawn.
As we've talked about, on your website and that with the lore, there's a lot more that you have put into place about Alistair. And as you said, he inherited the debt collector through a very specific event, which I didn't want to put on here, but again, it's available for fans.
We'll make sure to have a link down below.
Agreed.
That's fantastic feedback. Those are things that we've been very confident in the story material, not because it's because it's come so natural. It's because it's basically written itself.
Absolutely. I think it's been easy for me to kind of go through and like I said, finding more about these characters and the factions. Speaking of that, we've talked about our protagonists. Now we have, again, the other gray area under the sea. And this is Captain Charybdis.
Captain Charybdis. And that's a spin and a respelling of a very old sea legend of, because they might not be obvious comparisons, but of course you're going to go to, let's see, who's the captain of the sea? We're all going to think of Davy Jones. So you can see some of the inspirations that, are naturally there, but we wanted his origins when it came to who he was to speak to something without the connection to something like a kraken being so obvious and direct. And Charybdis was a sea tale that we unearthed through. It's something I had never heard of until did research for, and it's a leviathan or a sea serpent of some kind that's rooted in mythology that I had never read before. So I thought
that was in the Odyssey.
But
it was in the Odyssey. I believe it was in the Odyssey.
Yes, but Charybdis is probably the most multi-layered character, at least in plastic form right now, that's presented. He has so many implications to his origin, what the effect he has on the world and everyone around him, and the fact that his moral sphere is, a compass, so to speak, of infinite possibilities. He's kind of he's the personification of a gray area. You do not know what he's going to do. Each decision he makes is very purposeful, and his origins are divine by nature. There's quite a lot of him that is on the website now.
I don't know if it's intentional, but I like the way it looks. It looks like his head could just be a creature by itself.
I love it.
That's
I think
100% intentional.
And I love the whole idea where you said there's like he's really this element that can go whichever way his internal moral compass, as you said, leads up to. Because one of the things I found interesting in regards to this was, as I have on the screen, his goal is to purge the sea, to return it to what he believes is the pristine way of its existence, and that is for the creatures of the deep to have the oceans as it is. So
absolutely, that's his entire motivation, and he's connected to, obviously, one god specifically. He has this version of perfection, that it's this order that they could never seem to bring together, that he wants preserved.
We want to talk about the last kind of faction here that you presented on the website so far, and the one that I was like, oh my god, this is the showcase from it, and that is Captain Algol Deathmold.
It's Algol Deathmoid, and Algol is something that's a derivative of our initial inspiration when it came to a lot of our characters' names was something that pirates look to for guidance. That being the constellation and the stars. And so Algol, I can't remember what constellation it's part of, but that is a star that's present in the sky. And Deathmoid is a play on of an actual bone that's present, I believe, in the human skull somewhere that's referred to as the Ethmoid. We slapped a D on front of it, and we had our villain. It just wasn't really that complicated when it came to naming him. And he wrote himself into being after that point, which is fairly poetic considering his origins.
He's my favorite. Just saying.
He's almost everyone's favorite thus far. It's interesting because I'm sure there'll be time to talk about it, but he transformed the most visually when it came to creating him from the ground up. He went through a couple different iterations before we knew we'd nailed him. And it's funny that not only is he the only one right now that we have kind of a test print of to show off when it comes to that beginning stages of creating the character, but he took the most work to get right. And there's good reason that people are responding to that head sculpt, because it took a lot of work to get him where he
I'm
is.
just saying, you could build a franchise logo just around him. I'm just saying that face is begging for merchandise, even for non-action figure fans. I'm just saying, this is just so freaking. It's metal. It's metal.
I'm thrilled that that's the takeaway.
So this is kind of like in your universe. This is the chaos bringer, the chaos. Just as you said, the void of the black tide. It's just when you see this ship come up. I mean, things are going to turn bad for whoever's facing the ship.
This is the guy he has his own theme music coming on the horizon, and people just go.
Exactly. Deathmoid is supposed to be.
Feel free to use that, by the way. You can use that from me. I give you permission.
Right. Deathmoid is supposed to be that entity that when he shows up, that it better happen because it's in his name. Someone's gonna die. It's either no one's gonna survive, or at least someone's going down. So the stakes are supposed to be immediately amplified the minute he's there. Even when it comes to his crew, he doesn't really have anybody that borders on a lackey. If one of the perished is present, you will be perished yourself. When it comes to Deathmoid, his motivations are similar. They're similar to Charybdis in the fact that he's looking for this vision of perfection, but this continual theme of chaos that he's seeing through the influence and in turn the absence of the gods is that there is no order, there is no structure, there is no balance between anything. And so it seems that existence itself to Deathmoid is rather futile in its own right. And he's born out of nothingness. He exists because the gods no longer do. He comes from the void, and it's his intention and opinion that the void is that perfect state of being, and that there will not be peace unless he eradicates everything in sight.
So I do want to ask specifically with this captain here, who came up with the idea and the design for the repossession? Because that is the scariest freaking ship I've ever seen in media.
That's me. The repossession is supposed to be, again, it's really, really hard to not draw from points of inspiration and similarities, but something that I really enjoyed about another controversial movie, which was, oh gosh, all their names started to run together. Dead Men Tell No Tales. I think that was the fifth Pirates. I really liked the concept of the Silent Mary and the fact that it was this literal ship eater. It consumed the enemies that it defeated. And we wanted something like that, but on a much grander scale. So, that ship is hollowed out, and obviously it's pirated by ghosts. So it's supposed to be just, it's ethereal. It comes in and out of view. There's not very much of it to see. We wanted that idea to transcend that original notion. And so the repossession is not only just this kind of harbinger of everything around it, but it assimilates, it becomes larger, it adapts to its surroundings, and it has this continual burning hellfire on the inside that's consuming everything that it touches. It's Unicron, but it's a pirate ship. That's what it is.
I like the fact that you said that it kind of has its own character in and of itself. All these visuals and stuff, it just helps create and expand our desire to know more. This attention to detail and this desire to create this world leads into your conversations with the Four Horsemen Studio for the toys. Can you kind of briefly go through the process of how you kind of worked into this a partnership, I should say, with the Horsemen?
Absolutely. And that's probably my favorite part of this entire process, because obviously without that team, without the imaginative vision of that company, you don't have what you're looking at here right now. You can have all the inspiration in the world, but you need talent and materials and time in order to bring that to reality. And I had no knowledge of the company a year ago. I had never handled one of their products until Christmas of 2024, when Abigail, my wife, tracked down for me the Figura Obscura Jacob Marley. Christmas is a big deal in my world, and it's something that I have not just an aesthetic passion for, but it means very, very much to me. And it's something that Christmas Carol as a story has been pivotal and integral to me just as a storyteller. So the fact that there was an action figure of something that meant so very much to me was extremely intriguing to me. I just mentioned it to her in passing, and she tracked down not only that, but the Father Christmas figure that was available at the time.
Okay.
And I got to handling those two things that morning and was not only astonished by the nature of the product. I had never seen a company take something. I mean, that was the way we were describing it that morning. It was like Lego, but an action figure. I mean, they were intended to be mixed and matched and modular by nature, and that alone on a marketing level was brilliance in its own right. But the fact that the figure on its own came with the level of craftsmanship, quality, artistry, and articulation that it did was something that I did not know existed. And it's something that I very much wanted present in a product line if I was ever able to establish my own. But what I did not know, getting those figures in hand, was that very company was available for hire, that they still worked with people the same way they did with Mattel and everyone else that they began with. And so all it took was one email saying nothing more than, I have an idea and I don't know how to get something like this off the ground. Do you guys? And I got a very thoughtful, very thorough email in return from Cornboy, who I did not know at the time and have grown to know very well. He's a fantastic human being, absolutely wonderful to work with.
So when you presented your idea to them, do you think they said to themselves, why the heck haven't we done pirates already?
That was the emotional battle for probably the weeks leading up to, the first email I sent them was just, I have Toyline that I have an idea for. I would like to do something of my own. Can you guys explain to me how this process would work? They did so, but I was asked specifically to keep any of the specifics surrounding my idea to myself until we could get, an NDA in place to protect everybody's best interest before you get into the murk and the depth of that conversation. So the pitch came with a little bit of back and forth when it came to, them just making sure they were protecting everybody's self-interest on both sides before we got any ideas on paper. And I had the exact same conversation with myself. Why aren't they pursuing this idea themselves? And that's a good question for people to, keep putting in front of them if that's a question they want to ask, because it was so wonderful to have the reception that we did of the idea. They were just as excited to see it come to fruition. And so they were very, very supportive and didn't have any reservations of pursuing my idea and giving us the space to have our own world and establish it on a playing board that was relatively blank currently.
Let's kind of go through and kind of show what you've been showcasing in regards to the toy line. Now we are presenting again the concept of that could be coming out for your Kickstarter, which we'll get to shortly. But we'll start out here with what I consider like the most creatively detailed figure of of your line so far. And go
Kurt,
ahead,
this was something that took tons of thought, and especially within the initial conceptual drawings. He continued to, rather like, in contrast to Deathnoid, who transformed almost from one character to another, what he became. This was very, very naturally. He started out as a good idea and just progressively became a better and better idea. The more input we had from Horseman, the more life was breathed into that character. He actually initially didn't have as much growths over him when it came to his original concept art, and we started, once we landed on that aesthetic cue, we pushed it as far as we could.
He's got a sword, and then it looks like a corroded rifle or a musket.
That's correct. The shell spawn blade he has there is actually kind of a severed bone of a leviathan of some kind, and then his coral musket, as we've been referring to him. You don't see very many weapons like that in toy lines right now. I don't remember the last action figure I saw that was wielding a rifle, and we wanted it to look encrusted in the seafloor that he's come from, and his environment that he's born out of is an integral part to his character. It's what makes him what he is, and we wanted the objects that he was wielding to look like they were pulled directly from that.
Now, before we go through, there's some things I do want to ask, and I definitely, this is why I loved having T-Man on here, because he is our eyes in regards to, like, if you put a figure in your hand, how does it move? How can I put it into something that's going to be dramatic or not? So can you talk about the line in of itself, like the level of articulation we can expect to see? Again, with Four Horsemen, we've seen an evolution over time, but they were always much more focused on the aesthetic look versus the articulation. What was the mindset in regards to seeing these figures and like the level of balancing out that look versus getting a cool pose?
When it came to these guys, it's pretty equal pairing when it comes to the things that I enjoy with the toy. So, I have no intention of making really very negative comparison when it comes to any toy company, because everybody has their strengths and everybody has their priorities that they choose over one or the other. One company that I look to a lot of the time when it comes to a level of detail versus compromising functionality sometimes tends to be McFarlane Toys. They're very known for, creating sculpts that are immaculate to look at and are sometimes very, very hard to play with. And I've always been a huge proponent of both. What I would like is for the figure you're holding to feel like it's stepped out of a movie, but articulation and aesthetics are something that I have always wanted to be 50-50, one compromised over any one thing. Even when it comes to characters like these guys, obviously a question we get all the time is if they are, compromised by that coat all over them. And it's funny to me because I'm always happy to answer that question. But the figure I have actually started pulling people back to is the Figura Obscura Frankenstein, who in hand has not had any trouble getting around because of the nature of the material that coat is made out of. It's already, the design aesthetic is already meant to part out of the way for the figure in order for you to get all of the things that are present within the torso and the waist, which they have a full waist swivel. They don't connect and fit with Horseman products because that's just compromising to their design philosophy, and it's what makes their company what it is. But these are supposed to handle very, very similarly to, I've pointed people to kind of like a basic Legion builder, but they're actually a little bit more articulated than even some of those. We have thigh cuts, ankle rockers.
I do want to ask one thing specifically with, again, the overall articulation with the figures. We usually kind of say like this is up to a certain number. Or is there a certain number that you are looking to have as a minimum? Like, is it going to be, 20 points of articulation? You kind of mentioned some of the stuff in regards to thigh swivel, ankle and or boot swivel. Similar to what we see with the Horsemen, are they single jointed, say elbows, knees?
That's a pretty good way to compare it, so to speak, is yes, it's similar, but not exact. One of the biggest similarities would be the elbows and knees. So you do have that. It's something that I observed even just with some Marvel Legends recently, of making the choice to have that single jointed tin that made for a very natural arm rotation. And you didn't necessarily come with the double jointed elbow, but it gave you another advantage that you didn't have without it. So they have a bicep rotation, they have that forearm rotation, and then they have the single jointed elbow, which bends so far as is naturally possible. A lot of the articulation decisions that were made for these guys were, of course, very character specific. So, but when it comes to characters in the future, it's very much intended for each character's design style to inform the articulation they possess. So, these guys aren't acrobats, they're pirate captains. Of getting people to articulate naturally, it was something that we had to go back to a couple times.
And that was a perfect answer to kind of go with why I scroll back to this picture, because again, we're looking at the forearms and the level of detail there. My reason for the question is like, are we going to see where this sculpt for the forearm actually prohibits or makes 90 degrees even more of a challenge, or is it going to be sculpted in a part where like you can get 90 and a little bit as well as that swivel at the elbow?
You're okay. I was just going to say that Captain Buck is something that these guys have a lot of unique tooling between each character, but when it comes to things like their upper arms, their body, their pelvis, and their upper leg, those are shared between each captain. So everyone's articulation is very, very similar to the next guy. But when it comes to their knees and elbows, and so we wanted to make sure that these guys got exactly the most amount of articulation you could possibly get out of those, pivotal axes that are elbows and knees. That's what's going to make a character expressive without losing that naturalistic feel of those coat sleeves. So they get a little bit past 90 on all of those points, but not to the point that you start wondering if their bones are intact after you're done with them.
So T as
Yeah, I was up there. Above 90 is good for me. And I also like that I'm seeing a bunch of hands to be more have dynamic options.
Absolutely.
Now, will we see a mix of horizontal and vertical hinges depending on the shape of the hand?
Absolutely. So one of the most recent developments is we got all the way to the end of these guys and needed to add an extra pair of hands just to completely round out that loadout there. So there are horizontal as well as vertical hinged hands, and then there's going to be trigger gripping hands, which are not pictured yet, but they will be present later. And then you have the normal weapon gripping hands and the gesturing hands and relaxed hands. So the amount of expressiveness you can get out of these guys should hit the full gambit of everything you're looking for from a basic figure like this.
I was just asking, like I said, you mentioned before about cross compatibility for pieces, and I'm looking across here like to use the vocabulary, so we're on the same pages. The pauldrons across the top here of the jacket and the forearms. Are those overlays, or are those actual just sculpted for this specific figure? Like, can I remove
pauldrons, the boots, the shoulder pads, things like the belts and the waist skirt? The only thing that's shared, without being able to go through the articulation breakdown, because those are renders that we're still working on to present for the Kickstarter. So, like even the number when it comes to quoting how many points of articulation these guys have. I have to go back and review my material and actually quote what the horsemen give me to make sure that I have that correct, because there's terminology surrounding it that at the drop of a hat, I want to make sure is accurate each time.
I totally understand.
But it's just upper arm, the body, the waist, and the upper leg. So those forearms that you're seeing on Charybdis, they're unique to him. The only one who has something that I would classify as an actual overlay is Deathnoid with that rib cage piece over the torso.
So this hopefully will help kind of show with Alistair Morningstar kind of those articulation points you're talking about. He's really cool looking.
Alistair was fairly well established when we presented his concept art, and something that came about really early on was that visual of this fairly traditional appearing pirate captain who's supposed to be, he's not supposed to be terribly grandiose or flamboyant. He's not a character that's very full of himself. So he's subdued into not necessarily utilitarian, but everything he carries for a reason. There's purpose behind his attire. The only call to this something more to him is this glowing blue eye that's matching with his sword, which is referred to as the Eye of the Storm, is integral to the storyline. It's something that both the heroes and the villains are after, and changes the fate of certain characters depending on who's wielding it. And Alistair is not the rightful bearer of it, but it's something that kind of has chosen him out of and he's been plucked out of the sphere that he's used to and called to something more. And that sword is that personification of that choice.
Cool. My hands want it. My hands want it.
The third figure here, which, you said is like the most changed from the original concept to now. He's pretty cool looking.
Well, again, like I said,
He's
this guy,
something that
he's just so metal.
it's funny that you say metal, because that was exactly the design aesthetic that we stumbled across on while getting him to where we wanted him to be. The minute we introduced this metallic tone to his weaponry and to his pauldrons and his shoulder pads, and the minute we got that iron feel into him was what informed the rest of his character, elevated to the level of aggression that we weren't seeing in his initial concept art, and it brought him to this state of menace that was jaw-dropping once we got the original or the final pass for it to review it for printing.
No, subtlety is not something I would say when I look at this figure. He just looks really cool. So,
That's awesome. He looks, yeah.
You guys Dave, you're asking about scale, so I kind of captured these 3 images from Wade's Instagram. It kind of gives you an idea.
Interesting. It's like it's between the 6 and 7 inch in a way, because he's shorter than McFarlane but taller than a Marvel Legend.
We were we were very confident, not only in just that was a requirement that Horseman made to keep the toy line distinct into its own, to make sure that the scale was unique to its own independent IP, and the fact that we were able to get it right in between everything else that already exists and have it be just that close and just that much of its own was a sweet spot that we were very, very happy with, especially with, you got obvious comparisons like the Horseman products, which they fit in pretty darn well with. And then you got other toy lines that they're not to the same, like McFarlane is almost towering over everything else. And that was a balance that we were afraid we were going to run into or butt heads with, because especially when it comes to my preference as just a toy consumer, I'm wholly superficial. Bigger is better. I want the toy to feel substantial in hand. And so that was something that we wanted present within our products. But there's a line between scale and just sheer ridiculousness.
Right.
Something like that recent, Gamerverse Venom. He's insane. He's huge. He's bordering on inappropriately large, and he's a ridiculously awesome figure, but I don't know what scale he's supposed to be. He's not even that large in the game. He's just monstrously huge. It makes for a really cool product, but it's really hard to pair with anything else. So we were happy once we landed on that 7-inch scale, because it didn't compromise anything that the Horsemen were worried about it treading upon. And it also didn't hit on a scale that was making it difficult for the average consumer to work with.
Right, and that's where I was going to ask. You kind of this is kind of a bordering 1/10 scale in regards to it being 7-inch, and that was my question in regards to consideration, because a lot of collectors, like the 4 of us, I should say, in regards to, like, with Hasbro products or other independent lines, they're usually ranging between 6 and 6.5 inches.
Absolutely. I had them compared to some other figures that, like I said, are pictured in here and there. They look very natural to a lot of which is very, very helpful, the skeleton characters that Horseman has specifically. Really, really cool next to them. Despite the fact that you have someone who's a little on the tall side, like Alistair, canonically, he's supposed to be like 6'2" or something like that. He's a very tall person to begin with.
The aesthetic is different as well. Like they don't have oversized heads. I don't notice.
Right, they're a little on the chunky side. When it comes to the design aesthetic for a lot of this universe, we're definitely going for as much realism as possible that you can bring into a fantasy element.
We've seen what we have now, but what's next on the horizon? A little on the nose there for the company and the Toyline.
When it comes to this, what we submitted to the Horsemen was basically a story Bible that had all of the concepts for every character we had conceived of thus far. Since then we've conceived more of. These products right now are what's prototyped and ready to be produced once the Kickstarter is successful. And it's after that point that begins the early stages of we're not just launching a toy line, we're launching, oh my words there, we are launching a company. And building that to be a renewable entity takes a lot of time and a lot of resources and things that my wife and I are constructing on our own end. So
I gotta ask, when's the Kickstarter launch?
Right. And currently the answer that I've been able to give everybody is our goal right now is early 2026. What really is next for us, which is LegionsCon in November. So everybody's really, really, really busy right now. So it's going to take some time to get all of these answers and all the things lined up. So that, set in stone date is up in the air is the wrong word, but it's something that we want to make sure we have every piece of information possible before we establish it. And we want to make sure that the timing is correct. Right now, the toy market is, interestingly enough, for the economic state that we're in, very, very saturated. Mm-hmm. And so there's a lot of different ways you can go as far as, procuring something that you're interested in. There's lots of companies that you can look at to go grab something that catches your eye. And more of those companies are indie creators. So you want to make sure that you're picking a time frame that's helping not just yourself, but everybody else. There's a reason that the Horsemen kind of adjusted that timeline they had for Baethier before, because it just made more sense. And it's a small enough wave that it's not overwhelming people with choices. There's 3 products and 3 representations of, the biggest players of the world and the factions that are there, so that people can get versed into what this toy line is, what it'll become, without it breaking the wallet again, because they're literally dipping their toes into new water.
I gotta ask, the next question I ask is, now I know, again, if you go to the website at realmcorsairs.com, you can actually sign up and put your email in, which of course I'm sure you'll get that live notification when the Kickstarter goes live. Absolutely. And that way you guys can all fight with me to being those first 10 people who put their money down, because I really want to have that single digit on mine.
We are pirates, so I don't expect anybody to keep it civil, but within reason.
I guess the question then is, when things get crazy again and the Kickstarter goes live, can we see you again?
Of course. It's awesome. Not going to be, especially once we're ready to launch, it's not going to be hard to get a hold of me. I'll be sitting on my computer, hopefully watching the numbers rise. Absolutely. The Kickstarter, there's going to be lots of time made to make sure that anybody that wants to communicate, and by that point there's going to be tons more story content to absorb. There's things that came out just in this last week that were giving people more context than before. I would suggest anybody looking for it that's getting interested and versed in the storyline. We just dropped, I think, there was an event last Saturday that was a little snippet of the Pirates Codex, and that's telling pieces of the story in real time. Talks a little bit about the beginnings of the Tide Realm Isles and the conflict between the gods. It's a very interesting read. It's not terribly long. And it's a really good starting point for getting people invested in.
Oh, yeah. So we'll have it all here in our description, as well as passing it along through our various channels and such. But I do want to highlight that the first real debut of the Paint Masters and the company itself is going to be in 50-some days.
It's creeping up real quick. And we have not as much work to do as we used to.
I got my tickets.
Yep. We're
Yes.
really excited to be in front of people and have folks get a good look at, we've worked very, very hard to, but each character has a character specific diorama that they will be displayed on that's going to get revealed leading up to LegionsCon. We're going to get a photo of what the booth is going to look like so people know what to look for. And those will be fun because just those little dioramas give people a good taste of the world they're walking into and complement each figure.
All the work that's happened in the past 8 months is mind-boggling in and of itself. That, you went from an email randomly saying, hey, here's an idea, to now presenting paint masters and preparing to launch a toy line in a year.
It's pretty incredible.
Yes.
We are very excited for you.
And I hope they prepared you for the onslaught of people and the overwhelming amount of things that's going to happen over those 3 days. So overwhelming. There's so much stuff going on, but it's such a cool weekend and it goes by so fast. So I'm excited to see you in person, as well as the paintmasters and your booth there here at LegionsCon. So
we're excited too. It's that, things are getting very, very close to being ready to go. And I think it's my hope that people are going to be very, very responsive. There's probably no amount of preparation that I can do for myself. As how many folks I'll be talking to, how many questions I'm going to be answering, and we're both enthralled to do so.
Mike's got all your socials up here. Again, we're going to make sure we have copies of these in our video description. I want everybody who's watching this video to hit that Facebook group, subscribe to that YouTube channel, follow that Instagram, and put your email into their website, because this is a project. I think when this gets off the ground, we're all going to want to be on here, and no one wants to miss this ship when it sails.
I don't think so. That's the
I've been waiting to use that one all night long.
I was going to say, yes. You've been waiting so long to say something.
You guys have been, I've been enthralled to talk about it. I don't get tired of sharing about it. I don't get tired of talking about the story. You guys have any questions offhand that you think of that you want answered? I'll do my best, because it's just the DMs are always open. If you're curious and I can help out, I will.
Well, thank you so much for taking your time. We appreciate this. We'll let you get back to you and your missus. And again, everyone, I want to say, Quaid, thank you so much. Everybody who, of course, if you just joined us here, again, please hit that like button. Please hit that subscribe button. Follow this man's project. That Facebook page is going to be popping, I guarantee, eventually. Hopefully we'll be doing it. And Mike, thank you for putting all this together for us.
It takes more than one person to get all this stuff together. I can't say anything more. Again, it's been a pleasure talking to you, Quaid. Why don't we just close things out? And T, you have the final word if you want.
Well, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Quaid, for showing up. And
thank you.
Let's get out.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.